being given by this Bezdin. So the hechshers from the three Rabbanim that are listed on this new Bezdin that was formed. And I'll just repeat because I think maybe now you're recording this. I was approached a few months ago about being basically their mashgiach in the field to represent them. And I agreed to that. I made a few conditions, but that's irrelevant. I agreed to do that, and that's the extent of my function, just to represent them, to see that their policies are being adhered to in the field. As far as anything that happened in the background, I am absolutely uninvolved, unaware. I have no idea how it developed to this point, which is causing all the excitement and the commotion. It came to me as a complete surprise yesterday. I was in Panama. I finished working. I checked my phone, and whoa, all of a sudden, explosion. I had no idea that it was coming to this point. I will add that quite a few months ago, this was before Hanukkah, I met with the Rabbanim of this Bezdin, and I actually asked for this meeting, and there were two main concerns that I had that I wanted to clarify. And concern number one was what is going to be the relationship with the existing CHK. That was issue number one. It's not something I wanted to get involved in at all. And issue number two was whether they did the research as to what the Rebbe's opinion was with regard to Lubavitch giving a Hershel. Okay. And with regard to my first concern, I was told that even prior to this meeting, it was actually of all days, it was on Erev Sukkos. These three Rabbanim had met with the Balabos, with the owner of the plant, so Mr. Friedman from Montreal, very wealthy person who bought the plant, and his assistant, Leibowitz. They met with them. They flew in special Erev Sukkos in the morning to meet with them. And they suggested that this new Bezin should replace the CHK. And I was told by one of these Rabbanim, actually all three of the Rabbanim at the meeting, they were all at the meeting, and they told me that they told the Balabos that they do not want to get involved in the machlokes, and they convinced them not to sever their ties with the CHK. They will be like an additional hechsher, which is a very common thing. For example, even though Rabbi Weissmandel is the main hechsher, and up to this point, CHK, there was always the OU involved and others. So there are multiple hechshers, and that's what they told me. That they told the Balabos that they do not recommend severing the ties with the CHK. So that's as far as that goes. So that took care of that concern. As far as the other concern, they assured me that they did the proper research, and they came to the conclusion that it was consistent with the Rebbe's wishes. I didn't dig in too much because I figured, listen, they're Rabbanim, they did the research. I asked the question, and I was satisfied with the answer that I was given. So that is, in short, if you would like, Rabbi Yitkim, you can publicize this message that I'm sharing with you. Okay?
Yeah, and now let's get to the real topics, the real inyanim.
The real inyanim is that's the real inyanim, because that's what this shit was about. So let me begin with what the Alter Rebbe, basically, the first mimer in Parshas V'Yakel in Teira Or. It's a pretty long mimer, but there's certain tricks you could do. You read the beginning, You skim through the middle, and then you get to the end where the Alter Rebbe basically wraps it up. And in the beginning, the Alter Rebbe begins with the following question, and that is, we have a whole series of Parshas that address the issue of the building of the Mishkan. It begins with Parshas Truma, Parshas Tetzaveh, Parshas Kisisa, in the beginning at least, right? And then after Parshas Kisisa, that is all Hashem's instructions to Moshe Rabbeinu about how to build the Mishkan. Okay. Then we come to Parshas Vayakel. Vayakel is Moshe Rabbeinu gathered together Bnei Yisrael, and he now is conveying to them the instructions that he heard from Hashem as to how to build the Mishkan. So that is the order from Parshas Truma to where we are today in Parshas Vayakel. First, it's Hashem giving the tzivui, and this week in Vayakel, Moshe Rabbeinu is now conveying that command, that tzivui to Bnei Yisrael. Says the Alter Rebbe, we find something very interesting. There's a distinction between the way it is presented in Truma and then Tetzaveh and Kisisa, and the way it's being presented by Moshe Rabbeinu to Bnei Yisrael in Parshas Vayakel. What's the difference? So when Hashem gave the mitzvah, so first he begins in Parshas Truma with the Kli HaMikdash, which are the vessels that are to be used in the Mishkan, the Kli HaMishkan. So it starts with the Kelim. After the Kelim, the next part of the process and the mitzvahs that Hashem commands through Moshe Rabbeinu is the construction of the Yeriyos, the coverings of the Mishkan. And then only that, the beginning of Parshas Kisisa, we find that Hashem, in the beginning of Parshas Kisisa, Hashem says that, but as Shabsosai Tishmer, that you have to keep the Shabbos. And basically, in the Pshat, Rashi points this out, that the Pasuk is teaching us that in spite of the fact that we were given the mitzvah of building the Mishkan, it should not override the mitzvah of Shabbos. So whatever is being done for the Mishkan needs to be suspended for the day of Shabbos. Okay, so you have first the Kelim, then you have the Yeriyos, and then you have the tzivui of keeping Shabbos. When Moshe gives over the mitzvah to Bnei Yisrael, he completely changed the order. The first thing he does, he says, he begins with Shabbos. Then he goes on, and he continues with the tzivui of the Yeriyos, which, I'm sorry, yeah. In Vayakel, he says first Shmira Shabbos, and then he says about the Yeriyos, yes, and then only afterwards the Kelim. Exactly in reverse when he heard the mitzvah from Hashem. Okay? And so here, the Alter Rebbe goes into a long discussion, and based on this biur, this explanation, the Alter Rebbe explains why we have this reverse in the order when Moshe conveys the mitzvah to Bnei Yisrael. Okay. Let's begin with a concept that we're very familiar with, and that is what it says on the pasuk in the very beginning of Parshas Truma. When Hashem says, he gives the general instruction, "V'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'seicha." You shall make for me a dwelling place, and I will dwell amongst them. And what we notice in the pasuk is that when Hashem says, "I will dwell," he said, "Make a mishkan." He doesn't say, "I will dwell in the mishkan." He says, "I will dwell b'seicham amongst them." We know this from the famous Maimer of Basi Lagani. It's the very first chapter of Basi Lagani, and it's here in the Maimer of Yaakov from the Alter Rebbe, where the Chazal say, "B'soichei le'ne'amar," and the pasuk Hashem doesn't say, "I will then dwell in it," reference to the Mishkan, but rather b'soicham, I will dwell amongst them, meaning Bnei Yisrael. And from this we derive that although the Mishkan was a structure that was built for the avodah that was done with the karbonis, etc., right? But the pasuk is alluding to the fact that within every yid there is a little mishkan, and the avodah of a yid is basically the avodah that corresponds to the different things that were done in the mishkan. Okay. So here says the Alter Rebbe, so what would be the distinction between the kalim of the Mishkan, that Parshas Truma begins with, and the Yeriah is the coverings of the Mishkan? So here says the Alter Rebbe, the difference between kalim and the difference between the coverings, the roof of the Mishkan, is that we know that in our service to Hashem, there is both the study of Torah, and then there's the performance of mitzvahs. Okay? The difference is that when we understand the relationship that Hashem has with this world, we know that as far as Hashem himself, in essence, Hashem transcends the whole very concept of the existence of a world. Hashem is completely, he's not phased by it, he doesn't change by it, Ani Hashem Leishonisi. He's above it completely and totally and absolutely. Okay. But yet, he engages in the world. So how does he engage in the world? So the term that's used in the Zohar is the Or Ein Sof, the infinite light. And here the Alter Rebbe, he explains why the Zohar uses the term light. Okay, so this is something we've discussed this before. We'll discuss it again, as the Alter Rebbe discusses it again in this week's Torah. Why the metaphor light? Light is, after all, light is a physical thing, right? So obviously, when we refer to Hashem's infinite light, we're not referring to physical light. And yet, that's the term that the Zohar finds the most suitable to explain what's happening. Okay? What's happening in the context of Hashem interacting with a world that, in essence, he completely transcends, completely above. So, says the Alter Rebbe, because even with light, in spite of the fact that it's something physical, it has some very interesting, very, very interesting properties. Very interesting properties. What are the properties? Yeah. I'm sorry, what?
I have to go to Detroit.
Oh, you're going to Detroit for Shabbos?
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Why?
Kyle kept inviting us.
Oh, Mandel's going with you. Yeah, I'm sorry, family issues over here.
And Mandy
Yeah.
and it's birthday.
Perfect. Okay. Fergus of the hate. Have a great time. You need anything here? Yeah. Okay. That's my son Yichil on his way.
I love it.
Oh yeah. Good Baruch Hashem. Okay. I'm sorry. That was an improper interruption in the middle of the shir. Anyway, so you have the R, the light, right? And the metaphor light says the Alter Rebbe has some very interesting properties. So first of all, and here the Alter Rebbe doesn't really stress this as much, but this is discussed other places, is that relationship between light and the source of the light is that it's almost as if there is nothing that you could observe in the relationship between the Ma'ar and the R. The Ma'ar means the source of the light and the light. It just is, okay? So, for example, if you have a person that is teaching something, right? And he's teaching it to a student. There's so much that you could describe about that relationship between the teacher and the student. And you can see how the teacher is involved in this process of conveying an idea and explaining something to a student. Okay. When it comes to light, though, you don't see anything, of that nature whatsoever. Okay. Night, well, if you have a source, right, of light, then it's just automatic. It's just there. The light that comes forth from the source of the illumination is just there, right? Also, light doesn't seem to have any actual substance, right? So, scientifically, this can all be debated, but we're using the term metaphorically, and metaphorically, you could take what's called poetic license, and you could describe it how at least it appears to us. And that's the appearance of light. The appearance of light is that there seems to be no involvement of the ma'or, the source of the light, and the actual manifestation of the light. So this is one of the reasons why this metaphor is, what's it called? Is a preferred metaphor for Hashem's relationship with the world. Because Hashem, it's not, in human terms, we think of whenever there's a relationship, there has to be some kind of actual involvement, right? And this is not so the case, because once there's an involvement, we're looking at already change. There's the before, there's the after, there's the effort that goes in to this relationship, and it takes energy, and therefore, when back to the example of a teacher, after explaining something, is actually might need a rest, because he's exerting energy in order to be able to explain. Even mental energy, it's burning energy, and you get tired. Not so with light. So that the use of that metaphor is to explain that Hashem's interaction with the world is not something that has any kind of an effect. You can't see anything. There's no effect whatsoever on the source, on Hashem. Okay, but the other thing, and the thing that the Alter Rebbe actually focuses on in here, this mimer, is that the light, the Or Ein Sof, right? The similarity to the physical light is that light, just when it shines, it envelops everything. There's light in a room, everything in the room becomes illuminated, right? And at the same time, it's the light itself is also not getting involved with the subject that's being illuminated. It's just there. It kind of just encompasses it. Okay. This is the Alter Rebbe, is the Or, and this is the Or that's more specifically described as the Or Hasoivev Kol Almin. Hasoivev Kol Almin means that it encompasses all existence, but it does not take into account in any way, the different characteristics of what it is actually influencing. It influences everything equally. Okay, so this is called an encompassing connection. In Chassidus, the term would be that it's a makif, it's a kind of a transcendent, and it's enveloping. So it's like a lavush. That would be, by the way, represented by the yeriyos of the Mishkan, coverings of the Mishkan. But then you also have that this light has to somehow penetrate and have an effect. Okay. Now that requires another process, and that's the process of tzimtzum. Tzimtzum means that this infinite light has to be reduced to a level where it can actually engage in a meaningful way, in a deeper way. It's absorbed by the subject that's being influenced by this light. Now, for this to happen, there needs to be what's called the tzimtzum. There has to be a contraction of that light. But the result is that we have now a or panimi. we have a light that actually infiltrates and it's absorbed and it's appreciated and it acquires a characteristic, and it's a characteristic that is, by the way, it is something that is in sync with the subject that's being influenced. Okay, so this is a very a fundamental concept in Hasidus. We begin by Hashem's interaction. It's through what is metaphorically referred to as a light emanating from him. It's originally in its purest infinite form, and yet it's just light. It doesn't seem to have any actual substance or existence to it, and it effortlessly emanates from its source. But then you have the light penetrating, right? That's called the Or Makif, that's the Or Soivev Kolamen, and then you have that Or that penetrates, and that's called the Or Male Kolamen. It actually fills the world, and it actually it engages individually with every subject that it is influencing. The mashal, the example of this in Chassidus that's used often is the way the neshama gives life to a person, to a body. So there is what's called the chayis haklolis, just the fact that you're alive. You're alive, your head is alive just as much as your foot is alive. There's no more aliveness to the head than there is to the foot. So that's the neshama providing life to the body in the or hasoiviv, in the makivdik way, right? Which also reminds us more of levush, of like something that envelops and clothes. So levush means a clothing. Okay. On the other hand, that same neshama is what's providing your brain with seichel, with intellect, with consciousness. It's providing your eyes with sight, your ears with hearing, and etc. etc. Every limb individually is being provided with a certain a function that's coming from the neshama. So that would be an example of the Or HaMamale. There's something emanating from this neshama that kind of reduces itself so that it can actually be funneled into each of the different limbs of the body in sync with how that particular limb is constructed, and it then functions accordingly. Okay. In the Mishkan, that's the difference between the kalim of the Mishkan, the vessels of the Mishkan. Now, kalim, when you think of kalim, again, it's a metaphor. Well, in the case of the Mishkan, it's not a metaphor. It's the real vessels and the utensils. But what are utensils? Utensils each has a specific function, right? And each one is actually a keli, just as simply, it's something that you fill, right? So it's being filled. And that would be correspondent to the Or that's Memale Kolam, that fills the world. And then you have the Yeriyos, which cover the Mishkan, that represents, and that corresponds to the Or HaSoivev, the more encompassing, the more transcendent and encompassing light, right? Which the Or HaSoivev Kolam. Now, we mentioned before, on the Pasuk, but also Mikdash v'shachanti b'seicham, make me a Mishkan and I will rest amongst them, meaning that I will rest within the personal Mishkan of each and every individual Jew. How does this happen? This happens by Torah and mitzvahs. So we are connecting with Hashem by building this inner Mishkan within our own selves. And the way we do that, we do it with the with engaging in the study of Torah and the performance of mitzvahs. Which one would be the pnimi, the Or Mamale? Which one would be the one that is more involved and digested? That would be the study of Torah, because when it comes to the study of Torah, the only way a person can successfully study Torah is by actually understanding. You have to understand what it is that you are studying. If you don't understand it, it's not really called Torah. I mean, there is a certain connection that a Yid has with Torah that actually goes above, it transcends the understanding, because we have some kind of an inner connection. And we see this actually in the halacha that when the Torah is being read, Shabbos, the weekdays, so different people are called up to read the Torah. Today we have somebody who reads the Torah for everyone, but originally each individual person would be called up and he would read that portion. In some places they actually still do that. It's Fardim, yeah. But it's also not that common.
Yeah, we're learning all about it now.
Yeah. Okay. So actually, I just last 2 days, Wednesday and Thursday, I davened in the morning in a Sephardi shul in Panama, and I Baruch Hashem, I got to B'tuchen twice on Wednesday and Thursday. I even did the Birchas Koyanim, because that's the minhag of the Sephardim that even outside of Eretz Yisrael they do Birchas Koyanim. So I appreciate that. I like that. Anyway, so when it comes to the reading of the Torah, that's originally, and even today, when you have somebody reading, the person who's called up to read the Torah also reads along with the person that's reading for everybody to hear. The halacha, interestingly, the halacha is that you can make a bracha before, and the bracha is not contingent on you actually understanding the words that you're saying, right? Person does not even know what he's saying. He's reading the words very carefully, but he does not know how to interpret or to translate those words. He can still make a bracha. It's still 100% valid. That, however, is not limud haTorah. He's not learning Torah. He's not doing the mitzvah of limud haTorah. He's connected to the Torah in a deeper way because that connection also exists. Okay, it's actually that connection that we celebrate on Simchas Torah, because on Simchas Torah, as is pointed out countless times in Chassidus and in the Maimorim from the Rebbe and in other places, that we take the Torah, we dance with it. We don't do like we do Shavuos night. On Shavuos night, a whole night we sit and we learn, we study Torah, right? But on Simchas Torah, the Torah is still wrapped up and we just dance with the Torah. We're not studying the Torah. We don't even open it up, right? And the point is that we are rejoicing and celebrating a different kind of a bond that we have with the Torah. Okay, so yes, there's the study of Torah, but there's a deeper bond also, and it has its times when we celebrate it. But the basic mitzvah is you have to study and learn the Torah. So it means that you have to actually digest. It's referred to, Tanya, the Alter Rebbe, references the pasuk where David HaMelech said that Sisu b'nei my intestines are rejoicing, and the Chazal tell us that it was a reference to the Torah that David HaMelech was learning. So it's called like food. So food is something you eat, you digest, it's absorbed by the body, it provides the nutrients, and then so on. Okay, so that's the kelim of the Mishkan. The kelim of the Mishkan represent the learning of Torah. Comes to the Yeriyos. What are the Yeriyos? That covers. That's when a Jew does mitzvahs. As you see, when it comes to mitzvahs, you don't even need to understand what the mitzvah is. It's actually irrelevant. There are a couple of mitzvahs where part of the mitzvah is to understand the significance of the mitzvah. For example, when you put on tefillin in the morning, so some people are not aware of this, but you actually have to have some kind of a kavanah. The kavanah is that you're being mishabed your lev and your mayach. You are dedicating your heart and the service of your mind to Hashem. Okay, but you know what? If a person put on tefillin and he didn't think, or he was not even aware that he's supposed to have that intention, he is still doing the mitzvah putting on tefillin. He's doing the mitzvah. See, because a mitzvah is not something that you digest. A mitzvah is just something that you do. But what you're doing is you're involving yourself with what Hashem wants, His Ratzon Elyon, which is amazing. I do what Hashem tells me to do. I could do it in a manner that I'm not even sure what I'm doing. Okay, how many people think that take the lulav and the esrog and they really know what they're doing, right? especially when you're going on Mitzvahim, right? And the Rebbe would encourage that we should go and do the mitzvah with as many people, and you give them yeah, right? So there's certain kinds of sentimental connections and so on and so forth. But the bottom line is they're making a bracha, and it's not a bracha of Atala, it's not a bracha in vain, and they're doing the mitzvah, and they're doing it exactly the way Hashem told you to do it, and that's really, really very important, because since you don't really even know what you're doing, you better do it exactly as Hashem told you. It's on His terms. Okay? So that's the idea of a mitzvah. So a mitzvah is something that when you do the mitzvah, you are involving yourself in Hashem's ratzon, but involving in a way with that ratzon just kind of like envelops you. You're not digesting it. You're not integrating it. I mean, you could, but it's not crucial to the performance of the mitzvah. As a matter of fact, you could have all of the kavanas in the world, right? But if you didn't do the mitzvah exactly the way the mitzvah is prescribed to be done, if it's an issue which disqualifies the mitzvah, it doesn't matter how much kavanah you have. You didn't do the mitzvah. And if you made a bracha before, it was a bracha levatala, it was a bracha in back. Okay. So that's mitzvahs as compared to Torah. Torah is, you have to understand, you, the individual, the way you understand it. You can't just repeat what your teacher said and not understand. That's not, you haven't really accomplished true limud haTorah, the learning of Torah. Mitzvahs, on the other hand, is just the opposite. So your relationship to Hashem through mitzvahs is more where Hashem kind of envelops your existence. Whereas, and that's why it's called levushim, it's called garments. But Torah is called mazon, it's called like food, because you're actually ingesting it. Okay. Now this is represented by the kelim of the Mishkan, and it's represented by the areas of the Mishkan. Now comes Shabbos. And both times, we see that there's a connection between the mitzvah of building the Mishkan and the mitzvah of Shabbos. Hashem, when he gave the mitzvah, he first gave all the details, first of the kelim, then of the areas, the coverings, and then he reminded them, but you have to keep Shabbos. And then when Moshe Rabbeinu comes to the Bnei Yisrael and repeats to them this whole commandment, he did it just the opposite. First he told them Shabbos, and then he told them about the areas, and then finally the kelim. Okay, what's going on here? So here the Alter Rebbe goes into a long discussion of what's Shabbos. So I'll just, in short, so Shabbos is this amazing thing. When we serve Hashem, there's the serving Hashem the 6 days of the week, and then there's the serving Hashem on Shabbos. And I'm going to tell you just in short what the Alter Rebbe says here. It's a very amazing idea, very inspiring in a way. Every day we daven, we begin our day by davening. What do we do by davening? We stop, contemplate, and pay attention to what we're saying as best as we can, and hopefully we develop some kind of a ahava, some kind of a connection, a love to Hashem, so that we finally, when we come to the pasuk Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, right, and then we say right after V'ahavta, the mitzvah of loving Hashem, we actually have, we achieved something, hopefully, if a person davens properly. At the end of the day, that ava that you developed is going to be based on your efforts, based on your state of mind, how much meditation you did, and that will determine the outcome, which is the ava, the love that you have to Hashem. Okay, wonderful. Going to be very limited. It's based on your efforts. Comes along Shabbos, and Shabbos we hear something very exciting. The Alter Rebbe tells us. It says on Shabbos there is what's called a neshama yisera. There's an extra neshama, right? This extra neshama, says the Alter Rebbe, what that does, that extra neshama, provides you with this this love to Hashem, not contingent and not dependent on how much contemplation and meditation you did. That comes to you naturally because Hashem is infusing you with this neshama, and that's what this neshama does. Right here, today's Torah are. We have here the Alter Rebbe telling us the neshama chadasha. That's mentioned in the Gemara, right? Tells us the Alter Rebbe in Chassidus that this neshama gives a yid just this natural ahava. Now, this ahava, compared to the other ahava, is basically it's like the difference between two different kinds of desires. Ratzing. Person has a desire; he wants to do something. Now, there's two ways that you could want to do something: either because you thought about it and you understand the benefits, and then you debated this way, that way, this way. You came to a conclusion: yes, this is very worthwhile. I want to do this. Okay, so that drives you to go and do it. So you do it. But what's actually driving you is the seichel, right? The logic that led you to make that conclusion that this is something that would be worthwhile, something you want to do. Okay. But then we also find that there's sometimes a person is driven with some kind of a desire that he doesn't even know where it's coming from. It's something, much deeper. It's what's called a rotzin, which transcends the seichel. It's above the seichel. And sometimes this rotzin, in spite of the fact that the seichel is screaming everything the opposite, right? The rotzin is so strong that it says, no, but I want it. I don't know why I want it. It doesn't make sense. Okay, so it doesn't make sense, but I want it, right? So says the Alter Rebbe, this would be the difference between the ava that we're able to achieve in the weekdays as compared to the ava that's that we get from the neshama yisera, the extra neshama that Hashem gives us on Shabbos. One would be a product of the seichel, and the other would be something that completely, totally transcends the seichel. That's the ava on Shabbos. Okay? I mean, why the Alter Rebbe has to tell us? I don't know. We all keep Shabbos, right? And we all have a neshama yisera. So I think this should be something that's obvious to all of us, right? I mean, didn't you feel that last Shabbos? Aren't you waiting to feel it again this Shabbos? Well, if not, I'm sorry. I'm telling you what it says here in the Maggid. Okay, and I guess it's a rachmanis if we didn't know this without the Maggid having to tell it to us. Okay, but that's fine. That happens. In any case, says the Alter Rebbe something very interesting. We work for 6 days, and those 6 days they come to at the end of the 6 days, then we stop for Shabbos, right? So in the context of what we spoke about the 6 days being we work to on our own. It's not being given to us. It's not going to happen naturally. And we develop what we develop. Then comes Shabbos, and Shabbos we get it from above. Okay? We also have to do something on Shabbos too, by the way. That's why perhaps it doesn't come so naturally to everybody. You have to do what the Alter Rebbe says. You have to do all the Lamed Tes Melachos, but you have to do the Beruchnis right on Shabbos, and then you achieve that which you achieve through the Melachos, Bigashvius, and the whole week. Okay, but in any case, the Shabbos, the fact that we are even capable, and I'm kind of going to wrap it up. Which will explain the different orders of Truma, Tetzav, and Kisisa, where first it came the, making the Mishkan and then the Shabbos, and then when Moshe tells the Yidden, first he tells them Shabbos, and then he goes into the details of the Mishkan. So the fact that during the week, we could even attempt to develop a relationship with Hashem, that's pretty amazing. Hashem is the infinite. Hashem is like, we cannot wrap our minds around, what's Hashem. We feel him in some, unexplainable ways, mystical ways, mysterious ways. How is it possible? How can we even do it? And here says the Alter Rebbe, so it's not that you work for 6 days and you work yourself up to the level of to Shabbos. It's kind of a little bit different. If it wasn't for Shabbos, you'd never be able to succeed in the avodah of the 6 days of the week. In other words, because on Shabbos you have been so lifted up, right? That experience that you have on Shabbos is what gives you the strength and the motivation to continue the rest of the other 6 days of the week, even though actively you might not be having that same level, that same intensity of connection. But having had it on Shabbos, it lingers with you, and that's what gives you the capacity to do that avodah of the 6 days. So, we're told to work 6 days. And avodah, we have to work hard at developing a relationship with Hashem. The achievement is measured and limited. Then you have Shabbos. If it was not for Shabbos, where Hashem kind of lifts you up and he shows you, listen, guys, I know you're struggling, but on Shabbos, you have the opportunity to feel and to know who and what you really are. So that when you go back to the next week and the 6 days of the coming week, you do not get discouraged, chas v'sholom, by the fact that your efforts are, again, they're very, very limited, right? And the degree of success, listen, we all know. Rather than get discouraged by that and to chas v'sholom, kind of give up on it, remember Shabbos. Shabbos, you got it. It was given to you. You have it. And that establishes who and what you really are. So that when you go back into the 6 days of the week, you can, by remembering that, you'll be able to continue with the struggle, right? In spite of its drawbacks and its pitfalls and its ups and its downs. Another Shabbos is coming. You're going to go back to your real place. This, as the Alter Rebbe explains the difference. When Hashem is giving the mitzvahs, right? So for Hashem had to lower himself down, so to speak, right? So he lowered himself down all the way to the level that he gave the Torah to us so that we could actually understand that. You know what that means? Hashem took the Torah, which is b'chachma nafkes, it's from God's infinite wisdom, right? And from there it comes out, and it goes through what's called the ishtalshlos until finally the Torah is presented in words and terminology and concepts that we can relate to, right? And then we begin to learn it and we absorb it. So that's what Hashem does. Hashem does that first. He gives us the kelim of the Mishkan. He tells us, make the kelim. Study Torah. Bring God into your life. I'm bringing it down to you. I'm giving it to you. Then Hashem says, well, ultimately, it's all for you to lead to a higher place. Okay? Now that higher place is that now you have to understand that you understood the Torah. But there's another connection here that's actually going to transcend your understanding, and that's going to be the performance of the mitzvahs. And that's going to be the way that I'm going to envelop you without having to come down to your level. I'm allowing you to just engage in it, and you will be enveloped by Hashem. And then finally, we get to the highest level, which is the level of Shabbos. So that explains the order from Hashem's perspective. From the Jew's perspective, he can't start from the bottom. Do you know why he can't start from the bottom? Because where do you begin? How does finite connect to the infinite? There's no bridge. So when Moshe gives the mitzvahs to Bnei Yisrael, he says, listen, I'm going to give you Kalim, I'm going to give you Yeriyas, there'll be Torah involved here, there'll be mitzvahs involved here. But before that, I want to tell you something very encouraging. You are already connected above. And therefore he begins with the mitzvah of Shabbos. Start with Shabbos. Shabbos is where you are just naturally connected to Hashem. When you begin there, then you can go to the next level and say, you know what, you can do mitzvahs. And by doing these mitzvahs, you actively become connected to Hashem in a more real sense. And then finally, you could do Torah, which means integrating and then doing the work, and which is represented by the 6 days of the week. And then you could actually take that very, very transcendent level, those transcendent feelings of the Shabbos, and they can now become integrated to the level that it literally becomes who you are physically on the surface. The way you think, the way you feel, who you have become on the surface as well, not just simply in some inner core of your neshama. So again, Hashem, his relationship for us says, okay, here, listen, these are things, I'm going to give you the Torah. Based on the Torah, you're then going to go out to the next level, the mitzvahs. And finally, you're going to connect with me. That's from Hashem's perspective. So when he gives the mitzvah of the Mishkan, he starts first with the Kollel, then the Yeriyos, and then finally Shabbos. Moshe Rabbeinu, he knows who he's dealing with. He's dealing with Bnei Yisrael, right? And he says, okay, guys, start developing a relationship with Hashem. What do we know? Who are we? What are we? Who said we? Oh, wait. First, you should know this Shabbos. Shabbos means that you are intimately and innately connected to Hashem. Now that you know that, and you begin from that point, now you could start the process of integrating it, of involving yourself in something that stands for just that. You're going to do a mitzvah, and you're going to be enveloped by Hashem. And then you could then move on to the level where you took that, and it transformed your very existence, the way you think, the way you feel, etc., etc., etc. I just repeated myself again over here, but in order to make sure that we brought it all together. Anyway, so this
by Ma'ariv, we repeat 3 sukkim every day, 3 times. We have to get the point across.
There you go. So that's the pshat. That's the Torah Or of this week. And already here in Parshas Vayakel, so the Rebbe is already, throwing in Purim ideas, right? It's not really a beer on Purim, but the Alter Rebbe was already apparently in Purim mood, if I may say so, and he and he puts that in. He puts it in, but after Vayakel is the last parsha that's in Torah Or, but then we have the Maimorim on Megillah Esther, and Eretz Hashem. I guess starting next week we will begin focusing on some of the amazing things that the Alter Rebbe tells us about Purim, beginning Eretz Hashem in the Torah Or of next week. I guess we have two more shiurim, I guess, before. One more. Wait. Before Purim. Yeah. Wait. Baruch says. No. Next week will be that will be the Shabbos before Purim, right? Okay. So we'll get to Hashem. Next week on Friday we will discuss Purim. Anyway.